Changing careers is really challenging, even at the best of times, and these are not the best of times. Hey everyone, it's Emily, the Career Catalyst, and I really wanted to talk today about some of the kinds of questions that you are likely to get if you are interviewing for a career in an entirely new field or industry. This can be really hard because typically our inclination is to go for just kind of either raw emotion because we've gotten out of an industry that's felt really bad, or to sort of apologize for our lack of experience. One of the challenges that people are facing a lot these days, of course, is that not by their own choice, they're sort of in a position right now where they're looking for an entirely new kind of work. For example, I've talked to a lot of folks who are coming out of live entertainment fields right now just because there's no money in it at the moment. And so obviously to pay the bills, these are folks who are looking for new work. The other thing I'm seeing a lot of is people who have lost their jobs for various reasons because of the pandemic and are looking for something else, but have also realized that they don't really want to go back into what they had been doing before. So looking for a new career field entirely. And once you're at the interview, you will of course have gotten kind of all of your documentation together. So you should have a really solid resume and cover letter that you can absolutely draw upon for the new interview. So try to be as positive as you can during the interview, which isn't to say that those feelings you have of kind of bitterness or anger or disappointment about the previous job are not legitimate. Feel them, own them, but try not to put them in the interview. The cheesy thing I always say is that this is very much like the process of dating. You've just had a relationship end. You don't want your whole next series of first dates to be you kind of complaining about the end of that relationship. So you don't want that in the job search either, because either way it's off-putting, and you don't want the other person thinking you're still so hung up on the previous situation that you can't put your head and your heart into the new thing. So try to be as positive as you can. Don't make it weird and like creepy and over the top positive. You don't have to force yourself to be super delighted about it, but do put as much of a positive face on this new thing as you can. And then the other thing you're really going to want to think through and have some kind of talking points about is how previous skills are going to translate into new skills in this role. So think about how things you've done really kind of are foundational for this new field. Think about any specific skills you've gotten that work really well. So for instance, if a huge part of what you did in the previous job looked like paying attention to detail, tell them very specifically what that looked like and how this is going to help the new role. So it might be something like, in my prior job, I was an accountant. And as you probably know, accountants really have to make sure that all of the details are correct, because a small thing like a decimal point error can mess up the entire system. And then it takes hours to go back through and see where the error was. And I think this is going to make me a really great computer programmer because, of course, it's the same thing. You have to pay a ton of attention to all of those lines of code because same thing, a decimal point error can mess you up and then it's hours of work to go back and fix it. That kind of idea, right? And then if in the interim you've gotten some new piece of training, that's a really wonderful thing also to put out there. So think about any certifications you've gotten since in terms of entering this new field. So like if you are a project manager and you quit a previous job and then went and got Scrum certified, talk about that. And then also talk about the content of what you have learned and how that's going to inform this next thing in your life. So just have some fun kind of thinking about how those things line up and their connections. And then, of course, think about why you're excited about this new field. And that may even be specific to the organization. So they might have had a really interesting piece on their mission statement that you picked up on. They might have some great sort of success stories on their website. Anything like that that really demonstrates how you align philosophically with them is a really nice thing to add to that topic of conversation. So have some fun also with that. The great thing, of course, about the video interview, which is likely what you're going to be doing, and I understand also potentially adds a whole new layer of anxiety to the process. But the good thing is you can actually really cover your video screen in some sticky notes that have some of your talking points written on them. So you're less likely to kind of lose your train of thought and forget where you're going, and you'll have it right here. So you're not even looking away from them. You're just kind of flicking your eyes down to see what you've written there. So put those up all over. And then if you are a person who's very nervous about being on camera, or you get a little bit obsessed with your own image, make sure that you stick one of those notes on top of your own face in the images so you're not distracted by it. That said, do check at first and make sure that everything looks good, that you're not cutting your face off somewhere, that there's enough light, that you're actually visible on camera, because they do want to see you and they're not judging you. You know, they're not wondering if you're too old for this job necessarily at this point. They might be, but they're not saying, you know, I don't know, he's too handsome, she's not pretty enough, none of that stuff. They're just trying to make human contact with you. So the other thing is you want to make sure that you are really looking at the camera for this, and it's going to be tempting not to, because you're going to see the other people on the screen and your inclination will be to make eye contact with them. But in this case, the eye contact is your camera. So a lot of people will do things like put a little pair of googly eyes up on either side of the camera so that they remember to make eye contact with it. And then another pro tip is if you can do this without it feeling awkward, do make sure that every once in a while in the video, they can actually see your hands. You don't have to do it as often as I do. I'm a fairly gesticulating sort of speaker. But the reason for that is that seeing your hands in the frame is going to convey to them a sense of your trustworthiness. You know, humans are very suspicious creatures, just biologically, and not being able to see your hands kind of reads inside of our brains as a bit of a threat. And it's of course different now because you can't actually hurt someone over video with a weapon, but we still have that kind of hardwired into our brain. So try to do that a couple of times. Don't make yourself crazy with it. Make sure that you list out your talking points and make sure you're feeling really good about those so that you can go into the interview feeling really good. And that can include a lot of those transferable skills. For example, if you've used a particular piece of software that's going to translate really well to whatever is next. So like if you have used I don't know, if you were in higher education and so you used Banner a lot to track students, but you're looking into a job that's going to be using Salesforce, then you just talk about those two. So you say, don't start your question with, I don't have experience with Salesforce. Instead, start it with, yeah, I'm glad you asked me that question about Salesforce. So as you've seen from my resume, I have worked a lot with Banner. You might not be familiar with Banner, but Banner is a student tracking software that's used really commonly in higher ed. And so I've used it to ensure my students were able to succeed, to track their financial aid status, and to make sure there weren't any holds on their record so that they could enroll for the next set of classes. So that translates really well into what Salesforce does, except that of course it's customers you're tracking there. And so I'm really confident because of my deep knowledge of Banner that I'll learn Salesforce quite easily. And here's your pro tip. Then you get to say something like, that actually reminds me, what's your training like for this process? And you want to get a really good sense of what their training process is like for this new job, because in my experience, when there isn't a sort of spelled out, well thought through piece of training when people are joining an organization, that's when things really go pear-shaped pretty quickly. That's where you get lack of role clarity. So you, especially as the new person, will get in and not know what you're supposed to be doing. You won't know who is supposed to be training you. You won't know who to go to if that person isn't training you, and you won't even really have anyone to ask your questions of, so you'll just kind of be thrown in. And that's a really bad place to be when you're the newbie, because you don't want to be the one person rocking the boat, but also you won't be able to feel like you are effective in your job. And so that's just kind of a red flag for me. Ask a lot of questions in the course of your interview, whether it's a new industry or not, so that you really do get a sense of what kind of training they offer and what it looks like. And if there are other people that you can ask if some part of the training doesn't make any sense to you. So that's also for your own records. Plus, you know, as a bonus, it demonstrates a high level of engagement and interest in this new field you'll be going into. So I hope that's helpful to you, and definitely let me know what kinds of questions you have specifically, because of course in the process of a video, I can't get into the unit questions that you might have. And so let me know if you are transitioning into a new field, what that looks like, and any specific questions you have that we might kind of troubleshoot your answering of, because you've gotten loads and loads of skills from everything you've done in the past. And if you really put some thought into it, you'll start to see ways that those skills can really translate into whatever is next for you. All right, I hope you all have a great weekend. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions. I hope you're doing really well, and I will see you soon.